Hello and welcome to my Nico Robin comprehensive guide. I hope you find this helpful and informative, and I'm just going to jump right into it. So the game plan for the deck, at least the way I've found the most success with it, is 100% control and starve. Rather than going aggressive with trashing their life, like with the Nico Robin 6 cost or Basil Hawkins or 8 cost kid, I prefer to just heal, and I find that plays the best into our strategy of ramping to 9 Dawn quickly and then getting value out of 9 and 10 cost characters. I find that decks, at least in the meta right now, have a lot of difficulty pushing through all those heals. But there's also several options to support an aggro strategy. Either way, the banish and ramping are both going to be crucial to helping us execute that game plan efficiently. So we want to ramp to facilitate our curve. That means either going 2, 4, and then ramping to 7, 9, 10, or going 1, 3, ramping to 6, ramping again to 9, and then going to 10. Going second is preferred so that we can get to 9 Dawn with only using our leader ability one time, and you get the extra card for going second since first player doesn't draw. So I do prefer second, and you need 7 Dawn to trigger the purple Sol to draw 2 cards. You also want to heal every turn, at least in the way I play. Like I said, this would not apply to an aggro version, but the crux of my game plan is healing every turn from 6 Dawn onward. That means against aggro decks, you might be tempted to play Kuzan on back-to-back turns to kill 2 guys and rip 2 cards out of their hand, but I have found that it is not worth it because his 5k body is a lot smaller than Kuma's 7k body, and you would rather heal that turn instead of getting rid of a small body with Kuzan. In the case of a 5-cost Nami, after, instead of a Kuma or a Sol on 6 Dawn, if you play a 5-cost Nami, sometimes it's worth it if you get a really high-value pop out of it, but a lot of times it's still not worth it because you're still losing a card from hand and playing a 5k body instead of a 7k body. You would rather just play the 7k Kuma. And then the last part is that every counter matters. You want to counter wisely and efficiently because we only have so much, and late in the game, if they do manage to get a big board, they'll be doing several big swings against us, like if they can restand their Zoro, or just if they have a big board and go wide. We can't always prevent them from going wide if they're able to counter out of our swings on their characters. So you want to counter as efficiently as possible, and you want to take life somewhat aggressively. This means early game, if they're swinging 7k or higher, you're pretty much always taking that. And even if they're swinging 5 or 6k, if they're not an aggro deck, I'm still always taking that. Because you want to get to 1 life so that your Ace and Yamato get maximum value, and you can't do that if you're countering too early, especially because the Kuma is going to heal you on top of that. So if you're countering out of leader swings to your life, that means that's life that's not going to your hand, and that's 1 step further away from making your Ace and Yamatos live. You can also get bricked if you aren't careful because you do play a ton of top end, since that is kind of your whole strategy, is chaining a ton of top end. So you're the one who should disappear really helps a lot with that. And that also means if you have the option between playing, say, a Kuma and a Kuzan on 10 Dawn, or playing an Ace on 10 Dawn, a lot of times you want to play the Ace, not only because it's a good card, but because it doesn't take any counter out of your hand to play it. Whereas if you play the Kuzan and the Kuma, that's 2k counter that you can't counter with anymore because you committed them to the field. Now I'm going to go into the different types of cards you can run for your characters. We're going to start with the fodder. These are early game characters that usually only swing 1 time and then you let them die because you would rather commit your counter to your leader or to saving your big guys from getting killed by their big guys. If these swing at life, your opponent's almost always taking the hit because they don't want to take your leader swings because it has banish, so they need cards in their hand. They're probably going to take these 5k swings. So don't put any extra Dawn on them because you won't need it. They're taking the swing. Now, you have Kuzan. He can deal with little guys really efficiently. I love him right now. He's really good against Zoro and Rayleigh, 2 very popular decks. And Bonney kills the Bonney Searcher. He's good against almost every deck, honestly. Almost every deck is going to have a 3-cost or lower character that you can kill on curve. And it just feels great to kill it on curve and get a 5k body established and rip a card out of their hand. Lilith is another one I like, but you really have to play it with the heavy Egghead package, which is fine because the Egghead cards are really good. You have Nami and Luffy for strong removal triggers, and you have a ton of 2k options, the best of which are Frankie and Edison. Edison's trigger can't work because you're not Vegapunk, but you can still play him for 4 Dawn if you're desperate for the draw, or if you manage to trigger the Egghead event, you can play Edison from trash and trigger his effect that way. She's also playable on 3 Dawn, meaning she's good if you go first, whereas something like Bentham or Kuzan cannot be played if you go first pretty much at all, because by the time you would be able to play them, you could play Akuma anyway since you ramp to 6. So I do like her for that if you end up having to go first, or if you build a deck that wants to go first. Lilith is a very good early drop. She draws a card to replace herself, and she's a 5k body. Bentham lets you ramp without trashing a card from your hand, which basically means going second, you wouldn't even have to leader effect at all, because you could go 2, 4, 7 just with Bentham, and then you go to 9 for your 9 cost cards. And the nice thing about him is he has a 1k counter, and he can always swing into board because he copies whatever stat is the biggest on their board. So you can always swing 7 into 7 or 6 into 6 or whatever you need to. Next, you have your different options for blockers. I'm really not a fan of these right now because there are just so many ways in this game to make blockers useless, either by resting them or KOing them. And on top of that, Saul, while he can swing for 5k, he is a brick. And your top end is already full of bricks, and you really don't want to have more than... You don't want to have too many because you're going to get bricked up late in the game. And so him being a brick just really hurts his playability. On top of the blocker just like not being relevant half the time because people can rest them so easily. But they are an option if you want to play a more defensive list. And then lastly, Kikunojo and Hawkins kind of fill the same role of just an aggressive body that has a good trigger. Kiku is easy to... They're both easy to swing with because if they get swung into, you get extra value out of them, either healing or trashing a life. So good options for an aggro build if you want to go that direction. Then we have the mid game. You're only going to have 1 6 or 7 Dawn turn. Of course, that's just how the game works, you get 2 Dawn a turn, so only one of those turns will be 6 or 7 Dawn. So you really don't want too many of these cards in your list, but you do need enough that you see at least one of them on that 6 to 7 Dawn turn. So Kuma is the best one by far. There's a reason it's $30 to $40. You heal a life when you play it, and when it dies, nothing really compares to that at all. And especially in my list where I want to heal every single turn, this lets me start doing that a whole entire turn cycle sooner, which is just absolutely huge. Then you have Nico Robin, the flagship card of the deck when it first came out. This lets you trash a card from your opponent's life just for playing it, which is basically like getting a rush banish swing that's guaranteed to hit. You're trashing a card from the top of their life just for playing it, but the nice thing is it doesn't even rest itself. So it's going to be able to swing the following turn as well, as long as it doesn't get rested by a Tashigi or something. Unfortunately, its trigger just absolutely sucks. Your only targets are pretty much Saul, Brule, and Lilith. So if you are playing the Egghead variant, this might be worth including. Just it helps you be a little more aggressive on their resources, and it can play a Lilith out of your hand for free later in the game, which then you get Lilith's on-play effect to draw another card. I was doing that back in 09 format, but I don't really think this card cuts it these days, just because the deck does the defensive thing better than the aggressive thing, in my opinion. So this is a purely aggressive card. I don't really like including it, but it looks nice, and it's still like an okay option if you want to. Next, we have Jaguar Saul, 6 cost. This is one of the best pieces of support the deck could have gotten, honestly. The only thing that would make it better is if it had a 1k counter, or if it was 7,000 power, because it is kind of understated. But the trigger and the on-play are both just really, 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 really good. Drawing 2 cards is drawing 2 cards, It's crazy. This is probably what I like to play. Like, if I had to pick any of these cards besides Kuma, I would pick this one just because the trigger and the on-play make it worth it. It helps you be defensive by giving you more counter to your hand, and it helps you dig for your top end so that you don't whiff it. Next, we have the 2 options for Linlins. They both have no trigger and no counter, but they provide different ways of pressuring your opponent's life. Or in the case of the 7-cost Linlin, it gives you another way to heal, since they probably won't want to trash a life since you're already swinging with Banish. But there's always the chance they do, and then you can pivot to a more aggressive game plan. And then we have the Egghead Nami. She's a 1k counter and has a trigger for your leader effect. Unfortunately, she's also understated. Just like Robin and Saul, 5 for 5 is really not a good stat line at all. But her on-play is very, very good. You can kill stuff like Cavendish, Tashigi, 4-cost Kuzan. There's a lot of high-value pops you can get out of it. And the trigger is also insanely high value. And late game, you will be able to draw a card off that trigger as well. And then we have Egghead Luffy. Similar to Nami in a lot of ways, it has a removal effect on play and a removal effect on the trigger. Its stat line is a little bit better, still not amazing, but 5 for 6 is serviceable, and it's not a brick, which is nice. And then you have Sanji, which I haven't tested too much myself, but like I was saying, this game has a ton of way to rest blockers. This is another one. This is a very aggressive card. It comes down, rests the blocker, gets rush. The thing I don't like about it, though, is you do have to Dom minus, meaning you can mess up your Dom curve if you were trying to go 7-9. This would make you go 7-8, and that can be really awkward if you were building around those 9-cost bombs. Speaking of bombs, once we hit 8 Dawn, we want to play these characters every single turn for the rest of the game, so you want to make sure your deck list has enough of them to accomplish that. Your options are Kid, on play, he trashes a life, highly aggressive, and he can cycle into your bombs for later turns, or get bricks out of your hand if you have too many. Linlin is my favorite one on this list, besides, I don't know, Ace and Linlin are tied. They're both just insanely good. Linlin and Yamato fill similar roles of healing a life and removing a threat from the board at the same time. Just all around what you want to see in this kind of strategy. Purple Katakuri is okay, but I'm not a huge fan of it just because it has the issue of, like, you pay 8 Dawn for nothing if they're able to remove it next turn. And there are, unfortunately, a lot of ways to kill an 8k body. These removal decks have a lot of ways to do it these days, especially something like Shanks where they could just Divine Departure it, and not only do they 1-for-1, they spent less Dawn than you did to do it. But if it does live, it is an insanely strong card, attacking for 8k and then blocking for 8k every turn. I just don't like it because of how vulnerable it makes you to a removal effect. Then we have 9-cost Luffy, another aggressive option, 10k rush and drawing a card. Very, very strong, and it can combo with Gum Gum Giant pretty nicely, drawing a card to give you counter in hand. And on 10 Dawn, you can leave a Dawn up for the Gum Gum Giant and still play this card. And then lastly, we have Ace. I would say the strongest card out of these 6. It heals and gets rush most of the time. And the best part about it is even if it wouldn't give you rush, you still get that guaranteed heal, meaning if your opponent is trying to take it slow and not give you cards out of your life, you can still heal and put a big threat on the board regardless. Whereas something like Yamato would not be able to heal if they left you to life. Then we have the techs. These are additional options you might want to use depending on what's popular in your area, if these happen to counter those decks. Beer Luffy doesn't heal, and he does Dawn -2, so you will want to play him on those later game turns where you're already at 10 Dawn. But if he manages to stick to the board, he has really, really good synergy with your leader effect of Banish, because he'll give you a 7k Banish swing instead of your usual 5k. Yellow Katakuri is really good against decks that play big bodies like Mihawk and Rayleigh, but it doesn't help heal us, which can leave us a bit vulnerable later in the game. Sabo, we play exclusively for the trigger. You never want to summon this. You could if you happen to have 2 in your hand and you're at 0 life, but you have so many other ways to heal, you're never going to want to summon this. It really is just there for the 1k counter and the amazing trigger of drawing 2 cards. And then lastly, we have Onami, another one of the best triggers in the game. Kill a 5 cost is huge, such a wide range of things it can pop. It can hit blockers, it can hit Cavendish, Tashigi. Very, very, very good card. Next is the counter options. 2k counters, you have Baby 5 to draw 2 cards, Veggie to stop an attack and help you live a turn to swing for game next turn, hopefully. Nico Olvia also digs into your deck, similar to Baby 5, but this has the bonus of being a 1 Dawn 3k pump for your leader, which can come in very clutch on your lethal turns for math. You have Frankie, which can draw a card always and then sometimes play itself for a free 5k swing. Edison, which, like we said, doesn't give us our trigger, but you could summon it off of the Egghead event trigger, and you can still search it with Lilith. And then we have Brule, which is this deck's only really reasonable way to stack the 0-cost event to the bottom of your life, or a Veggie at the bottom of your life. I don't play this one, but if you're playing a Big Mom variant, this is a solid option to include because it is searchable by 1-cost pudding. That's about all I have to say on it. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it is an option. You have the 0-cost event, which is pretty mandatory in a deck like this since we play so many bricks in our top end. This is the best way to turn those bricks into counter late in the game. Then you have your 1-cost events. Rayquaza gives you 3k counter, but only later once you're at 2 or less life. But it has a really, really good trigger that you could trigger out of your life to summon a free body, or if you open this card, you can trash it for your leader's ramp effect. And then Gum Gum Giant, everyone knows how broken this card is. You're using 0 cards to get 4k counter for 1 Dawn. It can cycle you into your big bodies or cycle you out of those bricks if you need more counter in your hand. The only thing I don't like about these 1-cost events is it makes it really hard for you to play 10-cost Ace because obviously you don't have 11 Dawn, so it can make it really awkward if you have these stuck in your hand because you wanted to play a 10-cost Ace that turn. And the other thing is, even if you're playing a 9-cost character and holding up a Dawn for these, that means you're only swinging 5k Banish, And a lot of leaders will have 6k on your turn, like Green Purple Luffy or Shanks can get a free 1k counter out of its effect. So even if you do have 9k or 9 Dawn for a character and then 1 Dawn for this event, you still run the risk of your 5k banish swing not being relevant that turn because you had to use a Dawn on these instead of attaching it to your leader. Now I'll go through the general ratios that I recommend for each of these types of cards. For the fodder, you want to play 3 to 4 because you want to open at least one of them every game, hopefully. And multiple is okay since you can still counter with them or trash them for leader effect. But you don't play too many because later in the game you do not want to see these, hopefully at all. But if you do, you can still counter with them or trash them for Big Mom's effect. But you really want to be seeing your 2k counters and your top end as much as possible. And the more of these you play, the less likely that is to happen. I play 4 Kuzan in this slot. And then for the mid game, you have to see at least one of these on curve. Seeing more is fine in case you don't have anything to play on 9 Dawn. You could play a second Kuma or a Sol or something. Like you could play even a Kuma or a Sol plus a 3-cost Lilith maybe. This ratio is higher though because whiffing this on curve pretty much loses you the game. Very rarely will you be able to come back if you don't do anything on 6 or 7 Dawn. And you don't want to run too many bricks in this slot because most of your bombs, if not all of them, will be bricks. So you don't want too many here because you're going to have to run a bunch there, and you don't want too many in the list overall. For my mid-game slots, I play 4 Kuma because it's the best yellow card in the game. 4 Sol for the trigger, and it is a nice card to summon sometimes. If they swing low into your life, often you don't even take it aggressively. If you have a Sol in hand, you would just give them 1 card for counter, and then play out Sol to draw 2 cards, and that can be better than taking and healing life. And then I play 2 Egghead Luffy because I really like the trigger, and every now and then it can come up late in the game to play it for 5 Dawn and KO a blocker when you're trying to go for lethal. Then for the bombs, you want to play 11 to 12. This portion is the most important because you want to be chaining these every turn of the game once you hit 9 Dawn. Although in some cases it can be still really good to play like a Kuzan plus a Kuma on 10 Dawn. But that's not always good, and it does put counter out of your hand. So usually you'd want to see a big body every single turn. All of these slots are bricks, so make sure you have enough counter and enough counter events, such as Giant and Disappear, to cycle them out of your hand accordingly. For these slots, I play 3 Yamato, 4 Linlin, and 4 Ace, just because Yamato is the most narrow of those, only healing you on 1 or less life, while Linlin and Ace can always heal you, and Linlin always gets its removal effect off as well. So I prefer 4 of those and only 3 Yamato. And then for the counter, I recommend 17 to 19. I really don't recommend ever going below 17 or above 19, just because the ratios are honestly kind of tight. You need to see enough characters to play on curve every turn of the game, and you need to see enough counter to not die to big pushes later on. So I think 17 to 19 really is the sweet spot, and my list has 18 right in the middle of that. I have 3 Olvia, 3 Disappear, 4 Baby 5, 4 Frankie, and 4 Veggie. All amazing triggers, and then the Disappears to cycle or to get bricks out of my hand if I draw too many. And that leaves 3 to 11 slots for the techs. My current techs I'm playing are 3 Sabo for the draw 2 trigger and 4 Onami for the KO 5 cost trigger, both of which are 1k counters to make sure I'm not playing too many bricks. Here's a graphic of my list for convenience. Same thing I just went over, but you can see it visually if that helps you. And if you want to copy it, feel free to go ahead, make whatever changes you want. I've been testing this list for a while, and I really do like these ratios. For the last part of the video, I'll go over the matchups. First is Zoro. I would say this is highly favored. You want to take life aggressively to make sure you have 1 life left on your 10 Dawn turn to play Ace, or to get a KO with Yamato, because those effects are very crucial to maintaining tempo. Nami, Luffy, and Onami have great triggers for KOing Tashigi, Cavendish, and Koshiro. Kuzan and 4 Dawn is really good in this matchup. You can remove their Hiyori or Koshiro or Perona right after they play it, and usually they're going to counter 1k out of your 5k banner swing, so then the Kuzan rips the second card out of their hand, really limiting their options. If they block with Mihawk, which you kind of want them to, you should have a good chance to swing over it by playing an Ace for Rush, or if you already have one on the board, or with your Linlins or Yamatos. If they don't block with Mihawk, it's a win-win because they played an 8k blocker just not to block with it. And if they do block with it, you get to swing at it. Linlin's especially good in this matchup for killing Tashigis and Cavendish, since it gets around the protection that Koshiro would provide. For Bonney, you're still favored, not as free as Zoro, but still pretty good. And this matchup is a slog and will take a long time to win just because you don't play that many characters at a time, and they're stopping a swing every single turn, so it just drags the game out. You need to be patient, clear their board as often as possible, and stockpile as many heals as you can because the game will go a long time. Nami, Luffy, and Onami again have great triggers for killing their Cavendish and Rosinante blocker. Kuzan and Fordon kills their Bonney, Searcher, and Rosinante blockers. Linlin is really good for killing Cavendish, and Yamato can pop the blockers late in the game. And your top end is very capable of swinging at their Fortress Kid. Since we starve them, our hits should eventually connect. 9-cost Zoro is the main way they would beat us. Kill it at all costs, even if you have to throw all your Dawn on one character. For Rayleigh and Bella Betty, these are the aggro decks that don't have Rush, usually, on most of their cards, so we're even to slightly favored. Because they don't have Rush, we can manage their board long enough to stabilize. Kuzan and Fordon is very, very important, though. You do want to mulligan for it, because that is your main way to slow down their early game pressure. Yamato is also great for these matchups because their bodies are such low cost, they're always going to have something in KO range. And then Nami, Luffy, and Onami triggers are crucial to keep up. If you see these matchups a lot, maybe consider playing more of those triggers. For Red Zoro and other red decks that have a lot of Rush, these are unfavored for us just because the constant Rush makes it really hard for us to keep up. Our hand is going to get emptied very quickly, and we just usually won't be able to stabilize. But some more stuff to Rayleigh where you want to play Kuzan on Fordon, mulligan for it. Yamato is really good because they always have stuff in KO range, and then your triggers are really important to KO stuff. Ace is a little more useful here because when it gains Rush, they will have just swung with a Rush character, most likely, meaning Ace will have something to swing into on the board. Then for the decks that go wide and tall, these are just really, really hard to beat. They simply play too many bodies for us to deal with before we get run over, and their bodies are also 5k and up, making them much harder for us to swing over because they'll usually be able to counter out of those swings. Unlike Rayleigh and Bella Betty, where they're playing 2k and 3k characters that are almost always going to die to our swings. 9-cost Linlin is necessary for these matchups. Consider mulliganing for it, because Yamato will usually not have enough targets since these decks play cards that cost a bit more Dawn. Pray for your Nami, Luffy, and Onami triggers, because they are crucial to keep up, especially the Onami, because a lot of these decks will have a 5-cost body that you need Onami to kill. Consider taking more copies if you see these decks often. And then Green, Purple, Luffy, and Doflamingo are especially bad, just because they draw so many extra cards. Her banish is basically not going to matter because we can't really starve them when they draw a million cards. For Koala, unfortunately, this is also highly unfavored. Their leader abilities both inherently counter our deck. They get to draw extra cards to negate our banish, and our whole strategy is based around chaining top-end characters, and they're just going to make us take a life every single time, meaning that heal that we normally get will not be there to outlast them because we'll heal and then just take that life. This is pretty much only winnable if you draw 2 or 3 Kumas, because then you can play under their leader effect and not have to take life. Black, Purple, Luffy is pretty even. This is very straightforward. You both just kind of do your thing and see who does their thing better. We get to use Vanish to limit their resources and attack over their bodies with our 9k characters. Kuzan is very useful for killing their 3-cost Zoro on curve before he can swing in Rampadon. And then Beer Luffy makes our 5 to 6k Vanish swings useless, so kill it ASAP. Please do not let their Beer Luffy stay on the field too long. It will make them a 7k leader, and our Robin will not be able to banish anything. For Blue, Purple, Luffy, we are highly unfavored. This is a 6k leader that also draws cards with its leader ability. Basically just inherently counters what we're trying to do. And they have so much counter along with Gum Gum Giant that we're never going to be able to kill their characters. Shanks and Red, Purple, Luffy are pretty similar to Blue, Purple, Luffy, just not quite as overpowered, but they are still unfavored. Shanks in particular because Beckman can trash Kuma so we don't get the second heal, and Building Snake makes it really easy for them to kill our Linlins and Yamatos. And because they're a 6k leader effectively for Shanks and actually for Luffy, our banish is just never going to swing into their life because we pretty much always have to swing 5 or 6k with our leader, and they have the easiest time ever countering out of that. For Teach, this is actually a lot closer than you'd think because our banish really limits their hand size, which is already being discarded every turn to stop our on plays. And if they decide not to stop our on plays, there's a very good chance we just start winning because we get such high value out of those cards. Kuzan is really good to help remove Lafitte. This doesn't work if they leader effect right before your Fordon turn, but they're probably not going to do it that early. And if they do, that makes it less likely that they can do it on a later turn where your on play is a lot more strong. So it's kind of a win-win. You really want to see 4-cost Kuzan. It also gives you an extra body, which you want to be playing a body every turn because it's Blackbeard, and the way to beat them is just raw numbers. Don't always swing life with your characters. Sometimes it's better to let their character swing at your life first and then you swing yours at theirs. And then Egghead Luffy is very useful because it has an activate main, not an on play, meaning you can use it to kill their 4 cross bodies or less, which includes Lafitte and their blockers, and maybe a 5k body, but probably not. Usually just Lafitte and blockers. For Reiju, this matchup is also kind of a slog just because they draw so many cards and have a wide board that you're going to have to keep dealing with. But it really is pretty even just because our characters are so big, we can usually swing over their Ichiji's. It is possible for you to get high rolled by Portia Ichiji plays, but that's how Reiju is. That's how it is for every deck going against Reiju. If they see the nuts, that's what they see. You want to swing at their board when possible, but swing life if you have to. What I mean by this is don't try to starve their life because they're going to be able to draw enough regardless. So if you have like a 5k body and they only have 7k characters to swing at, just swing at their life rather than trying to starve them. 10 Dawn, Kuzan plus Kuma plays are also really good because they have so many 3-cost characters that Kuzan gets a lot of value from removing. For Smoker and Lucci, these are the 5-life black removal decks. I would say these are even to slightly favored. We play so many big bodies that eventually the blackjacks are just going to run out of removal. It takes a lot of effort for them to kill a 9-cost or a 10-cost character, just for us to play another one back-to-back. And our banish swings also apply a lot of pressure because these decks play a lot of bricks. A lot of times they're not going to have counter to stop those banish swings. And then Kuma is, of course, really, really good because it gets another heal on KO. And most of the removal in these decks is KO. The main exception is Tashigi, and then sometimes Kaido, but not everyone plays Kaido. Just swing at their board and counter efficiently, and you will usually win the grind game. Up next is Usopp and Sakazuki. These matchups are very similar to Smoker and Lucci, except 1, they have blue, and 2, they have 4 life instead of 5. This mainly means you're going to have to play around pudding, and they will have ways to remove Kuma without giving you the second heal, but they're still easier just because they have 1 less life for us to push through. And similar to Smoker and Lucci, they're kind of low on counter compared to other decks, meaning our banish will apply a lot more pressure. Then you have Enel and Vegapunk. These are both favored because we just kind of inherently counter these decks since they rely on triggers, and Robin says you don't get triggers. Enel will try to starve you out, so take life if they give you the opportunity. And then Vegapunk is pretty aggressive, so deal with their board efficiently or you might get overrun, but you really shouldn't have too much trouble just because they won't get their triggers, so they're not going to have free bodies from that like they usually would. Also, Enel's leader ability does pretty much nothing for them as long as we land the hit on their 1 life with banish, because usually they would get to counter out of it for free, so to speak, but because they don't get that life to hand, they lose a card instead of not losing a card. So their leader effect doesn't do that much for them like it normally would. And then lastly, don't be afraid to kill their Kumas. We really don't care about them getting that second heal because we'll get to their life eventually. It's much more important to clear their board, and then we can just swing for game once we have a board of 5 characters. For Kuzan, we're still favored. This deck is honestly too fair to keep up with us. Just play around pudding and you'll be fine. Our plays give higher value than theirs, and our characters swing for higher than theirs. We have 9k and 10k bodies. They cap out at 8k. They build their board slowly as well, so they'll have a really hard time outpacing our heal after heal after heal. Then for pudding and Katakuri, these are slightly to just actually unfavored. We can stop their triggers, but they heal a lot just like we do. And they have 10 cost Linlin, which is the same thing we want to do, but 10 times better because it has higher stats and trashes and heals instead of just healing. It's just rough. If they see 2 or more 10 cost Linlins, you are probably just going to lose. And Katakuri is swinging 7k almost every turn, making it really hard for us to stay healthy because we won't get a lot of those 1-card counters. We'll have to use 2 at a time, and we can't do that forever. For all these off-meta fair quote-unquote decks, we're generally favored just because they aren't equipped to deal with our removal, big bodies, and constant healing. A lot of them are also 4 life, meaning our banish puts a lot more pressure on them since they have 1 less card anyway. Just counter and swing efficiently, chain your top end, and you'll usually win the grind game, and follow the general rules of thumb like clearing their board, playing around triggers, and playing around pudding. For Blue Yellow Nami, this is slightly unfavored because we have no real outs to their Kikus. Linlin will let it trigger again, putting it back on the board, and Yamato killing it will let it heal. Brule is similar, but at least they have Yamato, or we have Yamato to pop it for no downside. But the main thing is that with their leader ability, they're never bricked because they can trash any card for 2k counter for the turn, so they always stop our banish swings, and they're also drawing an extra card on most of their turns, countering our attempts to limit their resources. And if we're ever in a spot where we have to play out a second 6-cost card, we just get blown out by Gravity Blade. So again, thank y'all for watching, and I hope this gave you a lot of insight into how Robin works and how you can succeed with it in the OP12 format. And the great news is that not a lot changes when PRB02 comes out. Some decks get new support, but Robin is still pretty well placed as far as like Zoro and Rayleigh and the popular decks go. And of course, it's not going to be a top tier deck. It doesn't have quite what it takes to have favorable matchups across the board, but it does have a surprisingly high number of good matchups, meaning you can pull off plenty of locals wins with it. And if you're feeling really crazy, you could take it to a regional. Do I recommend it? No. Would it be fun? Probably. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please consider subscribing. Thanks.